Good morning and a warm welcome to Empowering's third webinar. I hope you can hear me well. Today's webinar deals with adaptation to climate and is organized by the Empowering Project. Today's webinar will give you some insights on how you on local and or regional level can prevent or minimize the damage caused by climate change. And first out is Jonathan Malmberg from Scandinavian Green Roof Institute, and he will talk about green urban areas and open stormwater treatment. After that, we will take a short break where we have to close down the program and start it up again. So we will have to join us again. And Eva-Lotta Kukkinen from RISE will talk about how to build for a decent indoors climate. Okay. Once again, welcome and let's start. Jonathan, the screen is yours. I will make you a presenter and then you can start your presentation. Don't forget to switch on your microphone, Jonathan.
Yes, okay, here I am. Sorry, I forgot. So do you hear me good? Fine?
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. I guess you can see my presentation here, and okay, so I'm from the Scandinavian Green Roof Institute in Malmö, which managed the Scandinavian Green, which is managing the Augustenborg Botanical Roof Garden. And our main objectives is to spread information, inspire, and facilitate research on urban greenery and in general, but mainly in green roofs. I'm going to try to take away this webinar because I can't see the page. Okay, so we are owned by the Scandinavian Green Roof, the Scandinavian Green Infrastructure Association, with 30 members in the Scandinavian market. And this is me, and I'm head of projects and development and been so for 6 years now on the roofs. This is my contact details and our webpage. If you would like to have more information after this webinar, you're welcome to contact me at any time. I'm going to see if it's put. Yeah, this is a short 1-minute video from the roof garden. I hope it's possible to stream like this of the webinar, but you can see different surfaces. And we got about 9,500 square meters of different green roofs on our facility. And the facility, it's been on the roofs since nearly 20 years now. So today we're going to talk about a parallel process, or we're going to talk about climate adaptation with urban greenery and storm water management. And it's good to understand the background, and most of you, or all of you, know the parallel process that we have worldwide right now. We have an urbanization trend where more and more people is moving to the cities, and they become more and more densified, which also means we have more hard surfaces which cannot absorb rain. Parallel to this process, we have climate change, and Most likely we will have more floodings, which will cause disturbance in trade, a lot of real estate damages, and may also cause problems for people from a health point of view. Heat waves will also become more intense and more frequently, and we need to be prepared that this will cause a health risk worldwide, also in Central Europe. We get poorer air quality when cities become hotter. You get more a poorer air quality in general, also in the form of different pollutants. Here in Northern Europe, we will have an annual precipitation increase, and most important is that the intense rainfalls will become more common. Those within 1 hour, and with a lot of rain within just 1 hour. Right now, we have already, since 50 years ago, more than 20% increased average annual rainfall, and we estimate that this will continue. In southern of Sweden, where we are right now here at the Institute, we will have also mild winters, warmer and drier summers. And of course, in South Europe, you will have these problems as well, and with even bigger problems. I'm going to give you an introduction to what's been done where I'm sitting here in the eco-city of Augustenborg, in terms of open stormwater management to deal with problems with floodings. When this area was planned, that was about 70 years ago, there was only farming land, so fields for agriculture surrounding this neighborhood. So there were no problem with how much water the area could handle, because the water would infiltrate the fields around it, next to it. However, during the last 60, 70 years, the city of Malmö has grown, and we have had an urban sprawl. So now Augustenborg is not longer in the outskirts of Malmö, it's more a central part, in fact, due to the fast increase of the city surface. This is a map over the Augustenborg eco-city, and why it's interesting today from a climate adaptation perspective is the problems that was occurring because there was so much hard surfaces surround the neighborhood, and they started to have flood problems about 30 years ago. So because of that, the city of Malmö, together with the local house company owner, started to retrofit this area. They didn't talk about climate adaptation, but it turned out now to be a very good example, as an inspiring example how to manage open stormwater. So in the past, Augustenborg had severe floodings. We had social problems and neglected maintenance, and this is about 30 years ago now. A brief history background to this neighborhood and the city of Malmö in overall is that Augustenborg exemplifies the development in Malmö the last 60 years, from an industrial city to a sustainable city. And we had major problem with high unemployment rates in Malmö in the 1980s and 1990s. And we also had problems with the industry. And the city of Malmö, the short version is that the city of Malmö needed to act and do a lot of things to change this trend. They started to focus on small-scale business and sustainable business as well, and started to brand the city to be as a sustainable city, and they've been quite successful in doing that. One of the projects that was part of this change was the eco-city of Augustenborg. The eco-city of Augustenborg is much more than just open stormwater manage, and I will not stay on this picture a long time, just briefly here. There was a lot of initiatives on urban farming and also some crazy ideas like cutting the grass with a horse. But in overall, involving the tenants in the retrofit project of this old neighborhood. Even when they created the open stormwater system, so what's also called sustainable urban drainage system or sensitive urban drainage system, there are a lot of different descriptive names for this kind of systems. When you manage rainwater on top of the ground and not in pipes beneath the ground. Also, when installing this, they involve the tenants and the local school. Actually, the picture to the right is a tenant that designed this the onion leak canal. It was called. It was designed by one of the tenants. The eco-city of Augustenborg was awarded by the UN Habitat Award 2010. Stormwater management worldwide is basically the same principle. And what they did in Augustenborg was try to create as much as you could with local infiltration. Local infiltration means that you manage the water will be infiltrated on surfaces, on soil surfaces next to the buildings, or on roofs, as I will mention later. We will talk about green roofs. The problem here is that usually local infiltration is on private land, so you need to be able to involve the private landlord or house owner in this process. Usually in the public land, it's possible to detain close to the source, for example with rain gardens. I will show you a picture later on. If it's not possible to detain all the water nearby the facility, we need to transport slowly and then lead it somewhere where it's safe. This is how the system was created in Augustenborg. So it's the same map, but you should see a northern and a southern system with this idea of division of initiatives. So the slow and controlled transport with ditches and canals can look in many different ways. And basically, some of the canals was very, very simple, just creating a kind of a creek by a small bioswale, digging out the soil and putting in crushed stones. Some canals was also installed, which gives a more another kind of aesthetic function. So you can see a picture on the left, which from before it was installed, this creek, and then they digged out or excavated the soil and created a natural creek. Nowadays, it's not a very, very uncommon, but 25 years ago, it was quite uncommon to do this, especially in Sweden. There is an interesting project that, yes, it's the other, that you could check if you're interested in creating creeks. In Zurich, they actually have a lot of natural creeks that is flowing under the city. So in the Swedish daylighting program, they started to dig out these creeks to be better, both for aesthetics, but also to be able to manage urban drainage in a more efficient way. And it's called the Swedish daylighting program, and you can find a lot of information on the web. So digging out old creeks that exist beneath the city infrastructure. Rain gardens is a common expression, and it's very common worldwide now. Portland is still quite famous for the rain gardens they installed with the design features. Basically, there are a wide range of techniques for adapting rain gardens and installing them. So there is no single technique that is right or wrong. It allows runoff water from impervious urban areas like roofs or walkways, parking lots, or compacted lawns that cannot manage the water, and you lead it down to these plant beds, these rain gardens. It's very important to manage, so to make sure you don't have any erosion problems and that you can handle the water flow that you put into the rain garden. The purpose of the rain garden is to improve water quality in nearby bodies, and you also get an aesthetic function, of course. Usually, in a rule of thumb is that you could reduce the runoff from anything between 20 up to 40% with rain gardens. The ponds that was installed in Augustenborg is, you can see it's a pond liner, simple as that. And this is the picture to the right is now about 15 years later, developed into a small ecosystem with a wide range of plant species. Also, you can see birds, and it's quite self-sufficient in the maintenance that they do here is only taking away some of the algae every second month, or at most one time every month. The ponds is good for also cooling the outdoor environment and good for play. And one of the questions we usually get is if it's dangerous to have ponds like this. But so far, in 20 years after them being installed, there's been no severe accidents that have been occurred. Although there are plenty of ponds and canals that are nearby the lawns like this. So the 31st of August in 2014, we had the biggest rain event in Malmö ever, and this sustainable drainage system was tested, and all these creeks and canals leads to an open surface. You can see to the left where with a small rain, and this same surface, the same area was totally flooded on purpose, because it's totally safe that this area is flooded instead of the basements. That was the case 20 years ago. So to the right, you can see where this open surface in the park of Augustenborg became a big pond, or almost a small sea. Okay, so I will switch into urban heat island effect and climate adaptation with greenery. So it's important to understand that the urbanization trend, together with the climate change, leads into an energy balance, a poor energy balance in the city. In cities, there are much more and hard dark surfaces that absorb solar radiation and store heat. Meanwhile, when it rains, most of the water is led into the urban drainage, usually in pipes, and won't be absorbed by any plant bed or vegetation. So the lack of areas with surfaces that water can infiltrate and be absorbed limits evaporation, which in turn decreases the capacity to regulate hot weather. If you compare with natural areas or rural areas, there is both less heat that is stored and absorbed, but also evaporation from soil and open water, and evapotranspiration that occurs from the plant species, the plants and the vegetation during hot weather, also helps regulating the temperature in a natural environment. And this effect that we get a much hotter area surrounding cities is called the urban heat island effect. And the effect is bigger in warm areas than, for example, in Sweden. So in Sweden we have less problem with this effect, of course, but also during our summer period in general, it's more problematic the hotter a city is, or the region is. So objects, the black surface that exists in cities absorbs and stores the heat and the sun radiation. And you can see the picture to the right is with trees and vegetation, you have a lot of evapotranspiration, which is transpiration plus evaporation. And this will help cool down the city. There are several field and modeling studies worldwide that show that green areas can reduce surface temperature a lot. For example, on different kinds of green roofs, you can have a reduction by 10 to 30 or 40 degrees close to the surface, which will in turn have a small effect on, or will have a significant effect also in the urban heat island. You can reduce the urban heat island effect with a lot of greenery. I will talk about different types of urban greenery that you can install to make this happen. And the first is urban trees. We take sometimes perhaps our trees for granted, but they are extremely important for us. And maybe the most important climate adaptation investment that you can do. You get a lot of evapotranspiration from the trees, depending on what kind of plant species. Some species will drink a lot of water, and then you will have more evapotranspiration from these species. You will also get shade, of course, and they have an effect on wind flow. What's important, though, is to take into consideration that a wind flow in an urban area is very important to help keeping it cool. And if you place your trees wrong, you will actually stop the wind flow. So it's important to plan where you place your trees so you make sure that they help in the climate adaptation process instead of stopping a wind flow, which would have a cooling effect. In large numbers, they create what's called the park island cooling effect. And a couple of years ago, there was a study in Gothenburg, so that's in Sweden. In the summertime in Gothenburg, it was possible to measure the park cooling effect from one of the biggest parks in the city up to 500, or if it was almost 1 kilometer away from the park. And there are plenty of studies showing this worldwide you can find. They can also capture up to 500 kg of carbon dioxide every year, or store in when they grow. That's just a rough estimate, but it gives you an idea how valuable they are. And of course, the trees worldwide are providing us with oxygen and so forth. Urban trees are so important that we should make space for them. And I think this picture is beautiful, because this is how we should treat the old trees. The problem with trees is that, well, but in dense urban areas, usually you have a life expectancy that is about 25 up to perhaps 40 years, and very seldom for street trees you can expect that they will survive for the full what they could do in rural areas or in natural environments. Those trees that do survive and get very old, we should treat with big respect, and they are also the ones that is best for insects and by urban biodiversity. It's possible to plan the street, and if you plan a new neighborhood, you can plan not only from the traffic and the infrastructure, but also the tree infrastructure. This is from Uppsala Trädhandbok, so it's a handbook for installing trees that was developed in Sweden, and there is an English version of this handbook, which I can provide you a link to. One concept is to actually plan your architecture for having trees in different ways and creating different effects. Dense and big trees can become so lush that water will not be able to fall down directly under the crown, the tree crown. So the roots will search for water, but also oxygen nearby the tree. And it's quite common that we do not give trees the root space that they actually need, especially the big trees in urban areas. And you can see the picture to the right, where there are cracks or become damage in the pavements. This is also a reason. One of the reasons for this is also because the roots look for both moisture, but also, in fact, oxygen, and they can find it in under the pavement, and then that's one of the reasons why you get these cracks. And in Stockholm, it's been a method developed to manage this with plant beds that gives the roots a lot of oxygen, both space but also oxygen, and it's called the Stockholm solution for planting trees. It's become quite famous worldwide, and they use large stones and which is filled with some soil, and it's in Swedish it's skelettjordar. I don't remember, but skeleton. So it creates a structure which is good for the roots. And you can download this handbook for free. It's in English. There's an English version. It's also possible to move trees if you do it in correct way, and this is example from Sweden. Greening the facades is another topic. I will not talk so much more. I will not stop here for a long time. I will go to the green roofs, but this is a quite big topic. You can have climbers on the facade, or you can have green wall modular systems. The facade greening is much cheaper than the green wall modular systems. I will show you some examples. This is a hydroponic system in Helsingborg in Sweden, where the vegetation grows in a mineral wool and is supported with nutrients and water by irrigation. And it's the same kind of approach that, for example, Patrick Blanc uses, the techniques to supply or many others to supply green walls with nutrients from the water. This is a green wall in London, which is also hydroponic. The plants is not growing in a soil, but there are a substrate-based system where the plants grow in a soil. And this is another kind of solution, and this is from Augustenborg. And this is from Vienna, also in containers where the plants is growing in soil. And this is actually wild meadow plants. This is a Parthenopsis. So that's a plant that is growing on the facade, directly on the facade. And this is cheaper, but it takes a long time before the plant grown this big, of course. This is a very old plant in Malmö. And although it grows directly on the facade, it will not damage the facade. There are this species if it's well maintained and if the surface of the wall is intact. You may also have vegetation climbing on wires. Sorry, growing on wire systems, which has a benefit because if you do need to maintain or paint the facade or do something with the facade, you just take down the wires. With the vegetation, it's much more easy to do that, and you might even be able to replace them again. This is another example in Stuki, a shopping center with wires growing from containers, which will much faster create a very green surface. It's quite clever project integrated with the building. So there are climbing plants, but climbing from containers on each floor, as you can see. And in this way, you don't need to wait until the climbers reach all the way up, like the Malmö example I showed you. So, greening the roofs. There are still some roofs that are 100 years old that exist today. For example, in Wollishofen in Zürich in 1914 and Tübingen in Berlin 1920. What's interesting is that these was used for actually climate adaptation. Maybe perhaps not due to climate change, but this is water reservoir plants, and they put soil on top of them to keep them cool. There are lots of fantastic green roofs that prove that it's possible to have green roofs also for a long time. This is with dense vegetation and trees. This is just one example. This Friedrichs Hunterwasser in 1986 at Hunterwasser House in Vienna. This is also from that same building. There are a lot of different layers in the green roof build-up. And what's important to understand is that although this is not rocket science, it's important to have the right kind of components in every layer and that is tested and that you have the right kind of expertise. The most important for the plants to be able to grow is, of course, the substrate in the plant bed. and the thickness, the deepness of the plant bed decides what kind of vegetation you will be able to have, regardless if it's a thin roof or a very intensive roof garden. The soil that you have in green roofs is quite different from the normal soil, perhaps on the ground, because of usually a thinner depth. You need to make sure you have enough oxygen, but also that the roofs don't dry out. And crushed bricks and lava material like pumice to the right and crushed bricks to the left, are some common materials that are used for green roofs, because they both drain the roof but also help storing water because they have a porous structure. This is Bonolet in Malmö in 2001. And what we've been trying to do the last years is trying to get more biodiversity up on our roofs, but also have other functions. This is a diverse roof instead of just the sedum roofs that is common in Sweden. One of the people that inspired me a lot is Peter Desenja, chairperson of the Hungarian National Federation of Green Roofs and Green Walls. This is one of his roofs in Skanska office in Budapest. Here is another project where he retrofitted a sedum roof that exists actually on an IKEA building into a wild meadow up on the roofs. He also creates green roofs up on that looks like gardens up on this is on top of a garage with the design of a Roman garden. It's a fantastic green roof, which also have a creek on top of it. It's 2 stories up. Another person which proves that been proving that it's possible to create green roofs also in the Mediterranean is Andrew Clements, from which started the company of Oikosteges. And Andrew been doing green roofs for nearly 20 years. And it's possible to contact him if you want to get information about green roof in the Mediterranean climate. What he did is trying to replicate the natural flora and also ecosystem. An ecosystem is the plants and species in a system, in a big system together, living together, creating a system. So he offers courses where people can go out and look into the natural surrounding in Greece and try to look at what kind of plants that occur in nature that could be good for installing on green roofs. And he is also using a volcanic material like elsewhere in the green roof market worldwide, but he uses nearly only volcanic material, which is very lightweight but also holds some water. This is some of his green roofs in Athens. He uses some irrigation in the summertime, but he claims, and I believe him, that some of his systems don't need to be irrigated, but the customers don't want them to be looking like this or becoming too brown during the summer, so they irrigate to keep it green. I have one more, and I think I'm a little bit behind in time, but I hope it's okay. So greening the lawns. What's interesting with greening the roofs is that when we look at natural system, the same thing that we applied here in Malmö in Sweden is that we look at the meadows that exist in natural surroundings, which is dry tolerant, and can manage the harsh conditions in nature, and we put them on the green roofs. And of course, you can also create a lot more biodiversity, but also urban greenery on the lawns. This is another project which exists in English. It's was released last year. It's a manual for alternatives to lawns, with examples from Sweden but also worldwide. Usually we have lawns everywhere, and from a climate adaptation, of course, lawns is quite good compared to hard surfaces. But it's also possible to create more biodiversity and aesthetic value. This is a wild area, and sometimes it's hard to perhaps to accept this wilderness. It's uncontrolled and unmaintained. But there is a theory developed in the USA, which is cues to care. And that is that if you maintain and make some surfaces very nice and tidy next to the wild areas, it's possible to include this wilder look even in parks and other areas where you expect a lot of maintenance. It is believed that without the visibility of care, people will never accept any of these alternative messy high grass meadows. And this is in Augustenborg. We installed a meadow. Okay, I'm just wanted to end, if it's okay if I take 3 minutes more and talk about nature-based solutions beyond business as usual. So and also beyond nature as usual. Nature-based solutions is a new description that came a couple of years ago for this kind of natural greenery, but also urban water management. And the next step is integrating these green systems with the buildings and the technologies we use and have. At Albert and Victoria Museum, London, it's quite a fantastic wetland roof where the air conditioning system releases water when water there will be a small sorry, I lose the word now, but the air conditioning system, when it's very hot, it will you will have a little bit of water flow from this, and they use this to fill up the pond. So when it's very hot, it will not get dry because it's supported by the building's air conditioning system. And that's one way of integrating the greenery, because we have water in buildings, we have access to water for irrigation. I will jump this one and talk instead of the other way around. This is an exciting project by Edmund Snodgrass, which is a green roof, well-known green roof person in the US. And here is harvesting rainwater for flushing toilets. And that's another possibility. In Augustenborg, we are using, in one example now, it's a test, and it's quite successful so far. It's using gray water, so from washing machines, and filling up the ponds. And I figure that in hot and arid areas like in the Mediterranean area, you do have access to water, because inside you wash your clothes and dishing machines and so forth. So we have access, we have water for irrigation, In this case, we're using a special system that is developed in Sweden, which is very small, but still cleaning the water so much that it's possible to put out into the ponds again. It's developed by Carex of Sweden in Sweden. This is Alnarp Clean Water, a similar company. The last but not least is integrating solar panels with greenery, and it's becoming more and more popular worldwide. This is pictures from Switzerland, the two pictures on the top, and in bottom is from London. And integrating solar panels with green roofs is good because the green roofs can help cool down the microclimate, which is good for the solar panels. So the solar panels lose in efficiency when they got hotter than 25 degrees Celsius, and the vegetation can help reducing how much heat that is absorbed from the roof, and then stop this process of the solar panels getting too hot. In Malmö, we installed a similar roof actually right now. So thank you. I hope it gave you some ideas, and I will also distribute a link to various documents for urban lawns, urban trees, green roofs that exist, that is translated to English from different research projects in Sweden. And I will also distribute a link to different sites that you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for the very interesting presentation on green urban areas and open stormwater treatment. Are there any questions? You can raise your hand or put a question in the question section or write in the chat. There seems to be no questions. Thank you once again, Jonathan. And if you come up with questions, you have the contact details and can always email us or Jonathan directly for any questions and follow-up. We will now close down this webinar session for 5 minutes and start again with the next presentation and start up the webinar session again at 10:55. So talk to you all soon again. Bye for now.